Hello. Well, this is scary. Gosh. This is worse than the Brighton Dome when I stood up there. The ABBA had won the Eurovision Song Contest on that stage, but I'm not quite sure what's happened here. But it feels very dark. But, I do like a story at the start of my talks. So, and as a mum, I like reading stories to my children. So for this talk, I thought I'd get something a bit special. And I had a chat to Chris Boulton. When I did this talk at User Research London, I saw some amazing sketch notes that he'd done of my talk, and it kind of gave me the idea that I needed to talk to him about maybe something he could do. So he's an amazing UX designer and sketchnoter, and he does workshops on sketch notes and doodling, and he's produced an amazing comic for me. So I'm really excited to share this. He's done this all for the Research Ops community in his own time. So big shout out to Chris, because it's fantastic. So I hope you enjoy looking at it with me. So I'm going to introduce you to Ria. Ria is a senior user researcher for a software company. She's embedded in a product team, and she does a lot of tactical research for the product. She's also part of the UX team. There are 2 other researchers and 6 product designers. Most of the team do research, and they also give advice to other people who do research in the business. Ria's really busy, as she has a lot to do, because as she's a senior with a lot of experience, she's often asked to help teammates with recruitment, admin, logistics for research projects. She also keeps track of licenses for user research tools. She stays up to date with GDPR guidelines. She worries about ethics, and she also monitors PII data compliance. She's really busy and has a lot to do. So one day, Ria's asked to do some last-minute usability testing for a new feature on the product. She has very little time to organize things and fires off a quick email to some customers from the sales database. Very few people respond, so she has to email customers she has previously spoken to just to make up numbers. On the day of testing, she realizes she has forgotten to print out consent forms. Who's ever done that? Yeah. If that wasn't bad enough, the camera breaks down. That's happened to me as well, once or twice. She can't record the sessions. Oh no, this is terrible. Ria's normally so careful and organized, and she doesn't feel like she's done a good job of this research. What can she do? Is that familiar to any of you? Has anyone ever run some research that hasn't gone very well? Hands up? Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been stressed and rushed and had too much on our plate. So how can Ria do her best work? How can she improve what she's doing? I want to answer this question today, but I also want to answer this question that's relevant to all of us. As UX people, we should all be doing research, right? Hopefully you're all doing research. Hands up who's not doing research. I'm only joking, because I'm sure there are people that aren't here for other reasons. So this is the question that I'm going to answer today. First of all, we're going to talk about what the challenges are of doing user research. We've highlighted some of those in Ria's story already. And we're going to talk about what the right solution might be. And then I'm going to tell you about research ops and how to get started with it. Hopefully that sounds cool. Let's get going. Okay. So, about 5 years ago, user research, I did a talk actually for Gavin in Newcastle, and it was all about how you should be doing research. And it was like a completely different time, you know, in trying to get designers and people who weren't researchers to do research. But it feels like we've really moved on from that now, and user research is being accepted as an essential part of design and delivery. You must be close to your customers. You must even be obsessed with your customers. And people have worked really hard to get user research at the forefront of design and delivery. But with that comes a lot of pressure, right? So we've got bigger teams, particularly in government. In the UK, we're really lucky that we have some amazing forefathers and foremothers pushing that the boundaries in government, but also in private companies as well. But executives and management are often looking to researchers for guidance and holding us responsible. So as buy-in and team sizes have grown, the to-do list has grown, the need for coordination has grown, and the pressures have grown too. And while that's been happening, the support systems aren't matching those needs. In fact, it sometimes looks more like this, or even this. Sorry if you're getting a bit of a mic. Can you hear me all right? I can hear there's a bit of interference, but it's because I've got ridiculously small ears and they couldn't get the microphone to fit over them. So anyway, it may fall off at any point during the talk, but we'll cross that if it happens. Anyway, so often infrastructure to support research looks like this, which is pretty crappy when you're a researcher and you're trying to do research and you're having to be guerrilla about it, and ask favors of customers that you can talk to and that kind of thing. So last year, I'd just gone freelance and I joined a community of researchers who were discussing ways research can be operationalised. It was fantastic, actually, and it was like a breath of fresh air, because at my last company, I was probably the sole user researcher for quite a while, and didn't really have other people that I could talk to, so it was great to join this community. We decided as a group to run a research project to find out more about something that someone had talked about, which was this thing called research ops I didn't really know anything about. So we ran a survey and we undertook 33 workshops across the globe. That's why that's up there. So we had like a real global effort to run this research. And what our aim was to understand what this thing called research ops was. But during that research, we asked about the challenges of operationalising research. And these were the areas that we heard about. So we've grouped them into what we're calling the 8 pillars. And we learned that as researchers, we face actually a lot of challenges that are common. So I'm just going to talk to you about those now. So first of all, here we've got environment, and I'd say this was the biggest challenge that I heard about when I was going through the open-ended survey results, but also looking through all the workshop data. People are still having to fight this battle of buy-in for research, and they're getting pushback from either stakeholders or people in their team, executives, but also people silos is part of this pillar. So, you may be doing brilliant research in your squad or your tribe, but then you're not necessarily joining that up with the research being done in another squad or tribe. So Agile has its own problems, as well as, even though research is embedded. And in terms of scope, so we all talk a lot about scope of research. We all like to talk about methods and processes and what's, whether it's qual or quant, or whether we should be mixing our methods up. We like to have, arguments on Twitter about it quite often. Should we be doing research as a team sport? How do we create a cadence of research? How do we share insights? All of these things researchers find challenging, and that's what that pillar's about. We also heard lots of challenges around staff, people, and who does research. Sometimes you may be the only researcher in an organisation. Sometimes you may be a UX generalist who is doing research as well as all the other things you have to do as part of your job. What does a career path look like of a researcher? Do you have other researchers and a community of practice that you can lean upon for support? Another thing we worry about a lot is all these constraints that our organisation might put on us. So space to do research being quite a big one for a lot of people. Time, if, like I said, you're a UX generalist and or designer and you're having to squeeze this in to your week. Resources, budget, and things like market forces. You may be headlong into a project and then find that your company's pivoting, which is what used to happen to me a lot. This is a really big one that you hear a lot, recruitment. How many times have you really struggled to find participants for your user research, study. Well, we heard a lot about this in our research. We also heard a lot about coordinating as well, people and incentives, and how you actually get your company to, open an Amazon account for you, or organize payment of the people that you're talking to, managing all of this. It's a huge time suck for researchers. And then this is quite a hot topic for a lot of researchers at the moment, and data and knowledge management. So research libraries and repositories are something that a lot of people are thinking about. How you keep hold of all these valuable insights, because sometimes they can get lost in the ether. You kind of put them out there and think that people are going to act on them, but then how do you make sure that that organizational memory doesn't get lost and forgotten about over time? And then governance is not the sexiest of things, but we all like to worry about ethics and consent, things like data protection, and health and safety risk assessments if you're going in doing home visits, for example. These are all things that we also need to worry about. And lastly, tools. Do we have access to the right tools? I was talking to Barry last night, and he was talking about his remote working trial and having access to the right tools. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to share that, sorry, but so I won't carry on. But it's something that I think, it matters to us. But we also like to use the latest tools. We don't really want to be using the tools from, 10 years ago. Who manages all of that? What if you've only got one seat, which is a little bit illegal? Should you, and you're trying to share that between your teams? Is this working with IT? Do they really understand that you really need this thing and you don't just want one seat, you need 5? All of that kind of stuff takes a lot of time and energy to organize. So this is a lot, right? And some people, so I used to do all of this on my own for my last company that I worked at. So it's no wonder as researchers we are messing up sometimes and we're feeling quite stressed. It's no wonder poor Ria messed up. So how can researchers do their best work? Let's go back to Ria. In part 1, you'll remember that she was really, really busy and a bit disorganized and messed up. So what does she do? Let's go back to our comic. So the next day, Ria has a brainwave. She's going to get more organized. She sets up some folders and creates a toolkit of things she needs for every research project. She creates a checklist of things to do and check before each session. She's confident this will help her remember everything next time. The following week, it's Lunch and Learn, and a few of the team are sharing learnings from their recent projects. Next up is Sam, Ria's colleague in another product team. Sam is a new product designer and works on a slightly different product. He also does a lot of tactical research. Partway through his talk, Ria realizes that Sam has been working on a very similar research project to the one she just did. Not only have they similar goals, but she has reached out to the same customers to ask them to take part in research. Has this ever happened to any of you? Can you still hear me? I've just moved my mic. Yeah, cool. Has this ever happened to any of you? This has happened to me at my last job. It was not good. In B2B, it's not good. Poor Ria. She really feels pretty hopeless. She's frustrated that she didn't know about Sam's work. It could have saved her a lot of time to be able to join forces with him. So that evening, Ria decides to attend a local meetup. While she's there, she hears a talk about an emerging field called research ops. It makes a lot of sense. As the presenter talks more and more, it's like a light bulb switches on in her head. This is it! That night, Ria decides to become, I've got to have a superhero in a comic, Research Ops Ria. I think I love her cape. I feel like I should get one. I should have got one, shouldn't I? That would have been brilliant. What's on in a cape? Maybe not. So what is Research Ops, you may ask? So like I said last year, I joined this Slack channel, and it was started by Kate Towsey, who I saw actually speak at NUX 2 years ago about, it was like the beginnings of her research ops mission, if you like. So she'd spent about, I don't know, half a decade doing this stuff, setting up research ops organisations in places like the BBC and government here in the UK. And she thought she might be the only person in the world that cared about this stuff, but she sent this tweet and she said, hey, I've created a Slack channel, does anyone want to join? And I don't know, maybe about a dozen people went, yeah, that sounds good. Joined this Slack channel, and we all started talking about this thing, and I was like, research ops, what the hell's that? Why do we need another ops? Like, we've got DevOps, design ops, why do we need this other thing called ops? Just sounds like a load of rubbish to me. But I thought I'll join it anyway, and because there was all these cool people there, and actually, after being, like I said, the only researcher at my last company, it was a breath of fresh air to have other researchers to talk to. But after 2 weeks, there were 200 people in this Slack channel, and we were all talking about stuff, and it kind of seemed to make a lot of sense. So yeah, it's been a bit of a global adventure since then. But now there's 3,000 people in the Slack channel. It's a little bit mental. And we've got like a board, and we're called the Cheese Board. That was Kate's idea. And this is who we are. And we all look after the community, because it's quite a lot of work, as we realised, running a community. And it was just really a Slack channel to begin with. So Kate actually moved to Australia and started working for Atlassian during all this. So she's had to step back from running the community full time. Which is why we've got all of these people doing things. And we continue to keep moving forward in our understanding of what research ops is. And we've got new projects that we're working on this year. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of that in a minute. But after we did these global workshops, like I mentioned earlier, we came up with a definition of what research ops is. So I'm going to break it down because it's quite long. Research ops is the mechanisms and strategies that set user research in motion. It's not the craft, it's helping researchers focus on the craft. It provides the roles, tools, and processes needed to support researchers in delivering and scaling the impact of the craft. So it's quite simple. But let's go back to this for a moment. So if we think about all of this stuff and all of these things above our pillars as being like tasks, or we could even write some job statements, like Dan was talking about earlier, for what all these things are. If we think about all this as tasks that we're doing as researchers, and then it seems like we have a lot on our plates. But if we introduce a research ops layer, then some of these tasks can move upwards and become something that's perhaps shared amongst the team if you don't have a research ops person. But if you do have a research ops person, that can then be given to someone else to do, and it feels like we've got a lighter load. So it's just an illustration. This is just an idea of some of the things that we do. We also came up with this framework for research ops during that project last year, so you can find the link there. I'll tweet some of this out later if you're not catching all the links. And this really delves into all the areas of research ops and what each of the areas are. We'll touch on some of it shortly, but you can see that it all aligns to the pillars that I've just been talking to. And it works differently for different organisations as well. So really, it depends on your organisation and how that looks and what you might do. You might not cover all of this. This is like, the definitive framework, and it might be that only a small corner of it is relevant to you. Okay, so what did Ria do when she became Research Ops Ria? If you remember, she's found out about this thing called Research Ops, and she thinks it's going to solve all her problems. But how did she get started with it? So at work the next day, Ria uses the Research Ops framework to create an outline plan. Then she arranges a meeting with her manager, the head of UX. She explains to her what the problems are, what she's tried to do to solve them, and how this is actually a bigger problem than just her. She outlines the potential solution and how she sees herself being the one to get the ball rolling. Her manager's so impressed with her diligence, she gives her the green light. Ria is given a 6 months secondment to set up research ops for the organisation. Yeah. Love that cheesy grin. She starts by speaking to her colleagues and running a workshop to uncover all the problems with research. Using the research ops framework, she creates a more detailed plan and asks her boss for budget and headcount. After 3 months, she successfully recruits a research ops coordinator, Jay, who sets to work organising the tools and templates, forms, hardware, and files. Meanwhile, Ria starts working with the sales team to create a participant panel for recruitment. 6 months later, Ria and Jay have saved their colleagues countless hours. The team are no longer expending huge amounts of energy on repetitive tasks and have cut down on overlap. They have even saved money on external recruitment efforts. There is a new process and pipeline for research to ensure any projects are scoped properly and aligned to organisational goals. There is a managed customer panel for recruitment, and there's also the start of a research library to house all of their insights and organisational knowledge. Hooray! It's a great start. There's definitely more to be done, but with our research ops superheroes at the helm, anything is possible. Hooray! Such a happy ending. It all sounds great, doesn't it? We know the reality might not quite be like that, but how do you get started? I'll try and help you now with some slightly more practical ways to think about this. So let's go back to our pillars and our research ops layer and have a look at it in a bit more detail. So I've split these into two. And these pillars here on the right are often where the pain is felt most acutely, I think, when you talk to people. So I've been talking to people recently in the consulting work that I'm doing about helping them with research ops, and recruitment is always the thing that I hear first. And it's often the trigger for thinking about research ops. You can also have quite a lot of impact by starting with these things here. But this is where you need to start. So these pillars are all about how research gets done in an organisation. And by understanding the broader context of the research landscape, you can really actually have an impact with your research ops. So this is all about how research is supported here on the left, and this is all about how research is systematised and scaled. So this is all about context and capability on the left, and all about, the core of ops on the right. So that's all great. What does that actually mean? How do we use this to help us? Well, it's like anything, really. Like any design project. Talk to people, audit everything, start, and then iterate. So it's a simple thing that we all know how to do. I would start over here and talk to people about all of the things, but particularly focus on these things to begin with. And some questions to ask, not just, these are probably the simple ones that you might start with for any project, right? What are the challenges? What's working well? What could be improved? Those are great questions to ask, but there are some better ones to ask too. Why isn't that working? There we go. So these are all about the environment. Why does research happen in the organisation? Who's engaging with it? Stakeholders, colleagues, teams. And what are the constraints in the organisation and externally? You can also use a maturity model to help you with this. So this is one that Chris Avor came up with when he was working at NASDAQ. And it's actually a really good one because it's a design research maturity model. So we've used this in the research ops community, and I've also used it in some of my consulting work. And this is actually an example of where I filled it in with one of my clients recently. So what this told us by going through this exercise was that they had a real appetite for research in their organisation, but actually the appetite was greater than their ability to deliver their research. It was actually quite insightful just going through this with the UX team, something you might want to try. So back to our questions. Scope. So if you remember, that was about how research happens, the processes, and when it happens. What stages are you doing research? Are you doing it, are you working agile? Are you in squads? Are you doing lots of discovery research? Or are you not doing a lot of discovery research? Have you got analytics and big data team? This is all actually really useful and needed if you're scoping out what you need when it comes to research ops. And then thinking about the people. Who's responsible? Like I mentioned earlier, it's not always researchers doing research, but it's really important to understand the context and the capability of the people carrying that out. What are their strengths and where are the gaps? So an example here in the link there is the Home Office have recently been looking at their research ops practice, and Lisa Perez is heading that up. So she says in that blog post, researching the researchers is the way we're ensuring we're providing the best possible service. And something else that the research ops community has worked on that is open sourced and able for you to use, if this is something that you'd like to use, is a skills framework. So we've been doing some more global workshops. This is actually in beta still, so this here is a blog post on Medium. There's a GitHub repository that you can go and grab all of the stuff that's associated with that linked in there as well. And at the moment, the team are all going through the results of that beta and producing the final frameworks. This is really good, but there'll be an even better version soon. But this is helpful for working out the stuff I was just talking about in terms of where on this career path are your researchers? Are there gaps in their skill set? And it can help you work out, where the gaps might be in terms of perhaps resources, but also, taking on new staff. So it's kind of like a leadership and opsy thing that you can pull together. So once you've talked to people, then you need to have a look at what you've already got, because it's surprising when you start to dig through Google Drive and different folders, what you'll find that you've already got a lot of perhaps templates that you could start with. You've probably got loads of different tools that everyone's using, and you need to really understand what everyone's doing and join that all up. So, an audit's the best way to do that. I won't talk too much about that because it's kind of obvious, but Hannah Nagel has got a couple of great posts called How to Draw a Research Ops Owl. That's the first one there. And she talked in detail about how she did this at Salesforce. Once you've audited, you can get started, really. So I'd probably start over here on the right, because these are where you can have the most impact, are often the low-hanging fruit. For example, tools. We all love a good tool, don't we? We all like to try out the latest shiny thing. This is a massive Airtable of user research tools that was started by Kate and is now being managed by the research ops community. So you can see that it's work in progress, and we're adding lots of information. That's Holly and Mark who are doing that. So if you share it, please always give credit to the community. But if you're, want to do a diary study, what diary study tools are out there? There's a whole bunch of them there. Repos, all kinds of stuff. Another thing, like I said earlier, recruitment is a huge challenge. So another thing to get started with is recruitment. And a good research recruitment desk should provide both internal and external sources of participants. So something else to think about with recruitment is what is the user research participant experience like? So this is some really good work that Ben Cubbin and Nick Price did last year on that. And as a research ops person or someone doing research, we should be caring about our participants as much as the actual outcomes of the research. Ethics, something particularly in government, I think, when you're researching sensitive subjects, something that we really need to think about. So GDS have been doing some great work here. If that's relevant to you, you can go and have a look at what they've been doing. And then repository. So like I said earlier, too often insights are lost. So this is a great blog post from David Mann at DXW Digital. And he says in that, too often valuable insight and research is lost over time. And the danger is that teams are destined to make the same costly mistakes over and again. So this is a real hard nut to crack, but it is really important that we don't keep doing the same studies and repeating the same research. So again, lots of people have done great work on repos. Microsoft are probably at the forefront of this. This is both a Medium post and a podcast. I think it was Lou Rosenfeld's podcast here, where Matt Dugan from Microsoft talked about how they created their research repository. But if that isn't, if you haven't got the budget of Microsoft, and that isn't something that you can, create your own bespoke repo, Research Ops community are doing some great work on this at the moment. So they're looking at what best practice might be in this area, and then again, like with our other work, be open sourcing it all and sharing it back, so that not just looking at what best practice is, but things like what might taxonomy be that we could all use as a starting point. So the last thing to think about is that this will evolve. You'll throw an egg at the wall and it'll fall down, and then you might need to try something else. But it's an evolution. And I think what I've realized from talking to teams that have been doing this for a while, but also reading things that have been shared, it tends to kind of start to move over to the left-hand side here. And you'll start with these real core of ops things on the right. And then you might start to think about things like, okay, when we have new user researchers, how do they get onboarded? And is that something that a research ops team could help with? Likewise, what's our playbook of research methods? And could we write a playbook that we give to new staff to help everyone make sure that they've got that sort of underlying foundation of best practice? So yeah, research ops isn't just about scale, it's also about a foundation, building a foundation of best practice in your team. But it can also be things like, it's someone's birthday, so let's buy them a birthday cake. That kind of thing, caring and looking after the researchers. So here are a couple of posts from people that have been through it. This one's from Microsoft again. I'm going to just whistle through these. And then this is Lucy, who works at Spotify and set up their research ops practice only last year. So actually, even the big tech giants, Facebooks, the Airbnbs, Twitters, Googles, they've only just actually really started with research ops last year. So this is pretty new for our industry. So just a reminder, that's how to get started, if that's something that's of interest to you. But just to finish now with a closing thought, really, of why should this matter to us? This is all great, but why should we be thinking about this? Well, I care about this because it's about helping researchers or people doing research do their best work. And that's why I became a research leader, so I can help teams with this. So this is my call to you today. If you don't do anything else, go back to your workplace and think about the ways that you could improve your research and help everyone doing research do their best work. Perhaps you may even become your own research ops superhero. Capes are optional. Thank you.
Right, we are running a little bit slow on time, but bear with us because there is 2 questions.
Okay.
Go on, phone, hurry up. What would you recommend on an online portfolio to demonstrate user research experience whilst complying with GDPR? Big question.
That's hard. And a personal portfolio. I think take out any videos and any individual data that you've collected, and obviously, like you do with anything, you know, obviously at a conference or that kind of thing, you wouldn't be able to share images of people. Talk about the learnings, talk about the outcomes, rather than perhaps highlighting the individual people that you spoke to.
Okay.
Don't know if that answers it.
I think it does. Are your slides publicly available?
They will be.
Because they were magnificent. Not only just because of the cartoons, they were very, very good.
I'll share them because the comic, like I said, is really new. So I'm going to write, I haven't written it yet. I'll share it on Medium, but I'll also find out from the organisers how to share. But please, big up Chris, because he did all that in like 3 weeks. He produced that comic. It's awesome. So.
What are your thoughts on research ops remaining independent, or do you think it'll merge with design ops in the future?
I think it sometimes does. I mean, I know in Google it's all a centralised function, design ops, research ops. I think DevOps are part of that as well. So I think it works differently for different organisations, and you just need to figure out what the best way forward is for your organisation. I can't really say yes or no. It depends.
There'll be a case study at some point when they either merge or don't merge, or merge and then break apart again.
Yeah, it's kind of like the squads, tribes thing that everyone's doing now. Everyone's doing hybrid.
Wants to be a Spotify.
I think there's definitely the danger that you lose sight of what the research team are doing if you're off in a silo. So I think you've just got to be careful not to create more silos with doing this type of work.
Brilliant. Big round of applause for Emma, please.
Thank you.